What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Streckbein, joined always by my main man, Jacob Hunturi. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers got some massive Terry McLaurin news less than 24 hours ago as we were tucking in, getting ready for bed. Some of us watching the first football game of the 2025 season. Jordan Schultz dropped a bomb on us. We'll dive into that. Plus, we are just about 2 weeks into training camp. Friday Night Lights takes part tonight. Where do the Steelers stand? How do they look? What are the expectations and what has changed when you discuss this team from what you did 2 weeks ago? We're doing that. Plus, we'll answer all your questions as we do every single day. I hope everybody enjoyed the game last night. I won't lie to you guys. I watched the first half of it while out and able to watch it. And then I came home and realized that my YouTube TV subscription was not working and I didn't have my credit card in front of me. And that was the end of that. That was the end of that battle there. We lost it quick. How you feel, my friend? Kept the game last night.
I will also be honest. I watched 0 seconds of the Hall of Fame game last night. So I hope my prediction came true. I assume Trey Lance and Hendon Hooker was an incredible quarterback battle, and it just was TV that was just can't miss. And I will be disappointed for years that I did not.
It was not.
No. Whoa.
I mean, LA did win 34-7. That was the final score.
That's all my keen insight there sort of predicted that as well, so that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, hey, football is officially back. There is a game that was played. I'm feeling good. We're wrapping up week 2 of training camp here. It's an exciting time, man. I'm feeling good. I'm excited for what you have laid out for us today. I feel like we got a lot to get off our chests.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I think it's a very interesting day. I think it's a good morning. It feels great to be back in a studio, which is, there's nothing like sitting here going, plants dying. That's what I said. That was the first thing I said when we got on this morning. I said, plants dying, dude. I need to get back home. This is where we're at. We're taking care of it. It's in recovery. We're having a good time. We're having a good time. Let's talk Terry McLaurin here. Last night, we all got the news right around the same time. Jordan Schultz dropped a massive bomb on the trade market, the wide receiver market, that Terry McLaurin has officially requested a trade out of the Washington Commanders, saying, I don't want to be here anymore. Contract negotiations are not going well. Obviously, this is a tactic that a lot of players use when you hit a certain point in negotiations, and everybody will say the same thing. It was the first tweet I read after the Jordan Schultz tweet was somebody, I don't remember what insider it was, saying this happens all the time, but here's a list of examples where nothing occurred after the trade deadline. My argument to that is I hear what you're saying, and that is a great example to say it does not always mean a trade is going to happen. DK Metcalf requested a trade. You want to know who did not request a trade? TJ Watt did not request a trade. It does not always happen that way. It does not always reach the point of things are so bad, I need to ask to get out of here, especially when you're on a team that just made it to the NFC Championship game and has a second-year Rookie of the Year quarterback who looks like an absolute stud. I do not look at this as cut and dry as it happened and it means nothing. Now, if the Pittsburgh Steelers are actually in the running is a whole other conversation that we'll have. But I saw this, I got the news, and then I instantly read that next tweet and said, I get that. I really do. But remember when everybody said that DK Metcalf requesting a trade was nonsense and it wasn't going to happen? And then 6 days later, he was on the Pittsburgh Steelers. These things happen for a reason. Things are not good. The only way they can become good once again is if the team itself is willing to readjust their spot in this negotiation. And I don't have any idea if the Washington Commanders are going to be able to or willing to do so at this point. So I don't look at it as cut and dry of, yeah, it's a trade request just to push the notion, just to say, let's get things rolling. I think anytime a player says, I want out of here, make some phone calls, you best believe people are calling. And what happens there, I mean, only time will tell. You heard it. You saw it. What were your thoughts when it happened last night? Terry McLaurin requested a trade.
I I immediately thought of the Miles Garrett situation, and I think in essence I do agree with you. I do not think just because a trade was requested that a trade will occur
Yeah.
immediately. I think it is becoming more and more likely. I think you cannot dispute the fact that this has gone from okay to worse to things seem to be in a very dire place for Terry McLaurin and the Washington Commanders. So I mean, you cannot dispute that at all. At the same time, Miles Garrett came out, made a very public request for a trade in the middle of negotiations with the Cleveland Browns. And I think we all took that very seriously, as we should have for a brief minute. But
Yes.
it was clearly a tactic being used by Garrett and his camp to speed along the negotiations with the Cleveland Browns, and it worked in his favor. So I look at this and I see clearly there is a tactic being used here by the McLaurin camp. I don't think it's going to pay off in his favor, at least immediately, but it certainly is putting all of the pressure back on the Washington Commanders to either get a deal done with him or to make a trade happen and try to get adequate value, I should add, for one of the top wide receivers in the league. So I saw it, I read it, and I thought, wow, this just got a lot juicier.
Yes.
I don't feel like a trade is happening, though, despite the update. I think this might just might quicken the clock on getting a deal done. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we see a new contract get announced for Terry McLaurin in the coming days before we see a trade of Terry McLaurin out of Washington.
What is the deadline to you? When does your mind say, okay, it's this happened X amount of days ago, X amount of weeks ago, nothing has happened. When does that start to become like, it didn't work. The pushing the button, trying to get a deal done, the tactic wasn't as strong as we thought it was going to be. What is that day for you?
I'd give it 2 weeks. I think if there isn't a deal done within 7 to 10 days, I will probably shift completely my mindset on this and think, okay, there's a trade happening here. There's a trade in the works. There's phone calls happening. It's just what is the deal that can get done and what suits Washington's needs and what kind of value can they get back once they are already backed into a corner. I'm going to give them a week. I'm going to give them 10 days. I think this is clearly reaching a fever pitch, an apex, if you will.
Yeah.
But I do think that a deal is going to get done here shortly between McLaurin and the Commanders. And if it doesn't happen in that week window, that 10-day window, we can gear up. I think we can really be thinking about, is Omar Khan going to do something crazy again? Is he going to pull off some sort of blockbuster deal to improve the Steelers offense once again this summer? I think the question has to be out there, and we have to take it a little bit more seriously.
That's my thought immediately is, look, I don't think Terry McLaurin's going to end up in Pittsburgh. I don't. But I also there were two names this offseason that I was called crazy for talking about, and that was DK Metcalf and Jalen Ramsey. The door was cracked for both of them, and my simple answer was, if the door's cracked, maybe something could happen. Maybe the Steelers are going to be that aggressive. The door just became cracked, and I don't know. I don't know what happens. When we're about to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and where they stand in terms of competitiveness and your thoughts on them after 2 weeks of training camp. But when you look at Roman Wilson not really impressing, when you look at Calvin Austin having good days and not so good days, and Jonnu Smith kind of being an all-around guy, and DK Metcalf starting to kind of show himself, this is kind of a two-parter, both sides question here. Do you think that the Steelers offense finally looking good yesterday helps the Steelers go, maybe these guys are good. Maybe we do put them over the edge here. Maybe we do kind of just say, screw it. Let's see what happens if we also add Terry McLaurin. And at the same time, do you think that Roman not really impressing at this point, it adds to that, not in the same light, but in a different light of like, you know what, maybe it is time for us to make some phone calls. Not saying make a trade, but make some phone calls, check some price tags, see where we stand with some stuff.
I think the lack of, call it, good tape from Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin through 2 weeks has to really be pushing this along, if it's happening at all, within the confines of the Steelers executive team and Omar Khan and company. It's adding Terry McLaurin obviously elevates this team in a way that they are not at right now. It obviously gives them an elite pass catching room in a way that they do not have now. That is intriguing as heck. I know Omar Khan wants to think about that always, but it really, what sticks out to me completely is that there is Roman Wilson's catch over Joey Porter Jr. yesterday was the very first moment that we have highlighted Roman Wilson on this show. Not that
Yes.
he hasn't made some sort of, good
No, I hear
plays and
you.
he's looked decent and stuff, but he has not looked like a wide receiver two at all. Same thing with Calvin Austin. We're having trouble even finding times where he's getting the ball and finding that connection with Aaron Rodgers. So it's more about the fact that there is nothing being presented with the current group of guys, and there is so much underwhelmingness happening from the guys currently in the room, and I think that is pushing this along further than anything else, more so than the Terry McLaurin news. I think it's just the lack of anything happening within the wide receiving room for the Steelers right now.
Yes, I look at it the same way. As if the Steelers were going to make a phone call, they have all the ammo to make a phone call, because Roman has come in here, and no matter how many times Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin say, yeah, Roman looks really impressive, we're very excited about Roman Wilson, he's doing nothing, like literally nothing. And his snaps on offense are becoming less and less as we move forward. I just think that, where you stand, where the Steelers stand, I'm not saying a deal. I don't predict a deal gets done. I do predict Omar Khan makes a phone call and says, it's a Friday. We don't have practice till tonight. Maybe, just maybe, we see what's going on here. And then they go from there. And again, would I predict it? No. But do I think the door is cracked? And do I think Omar Khan loves to check on cracked doors? Yeah. The guy he walks by a door everywhere and goes, oh shit, you see that door? It's a little bit open. I'm just going to peek in. Omar is just a guy always looking in some doors. And sometimes you walk away with a DK Metcalf and a Jalen Ramsey and a Jonnu Smith, which is, that's a lot to tell you what could happen with the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, let's transition this conversation into what we've seen at training camp. Terry McLaurin, maybe not. I'm sure there's a bunch of questions. We're going to dive into them in a little while. We just got a Gunnar Olszewski salad in the chat, which is so incredible. Shout out, my guy. Hope he's doing well in New York. I still want to hear a Gunnar Olszewski story real fast. When it comes to Gunnar Olszewski, the best story I have is the Steelers won a game once, and he walked up to Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool had a big game in this game. Gave him a pouch, like a chew pouch. Chase puts it in. Okay, he's fired up. First chew. He's like, dude, I'm a badass. You know what I mean? And I walked up to Chase. I walked up to Gunnar, said, did you give that to Chase? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, is that his first one? He's like, yeah. And I walked up to Chase and said, yo, dude, first one? He said, oh, yeah, dude, I'm buzzing. I said, yeah, you're going to be puking in about an hour. Next day, he came in. I said, how you feel? And he said, dude, I threw up all night. It sucked. I was like, yeah, that's what happens, pal. Shout out to Gunnar Olszewski, the original Texas boy. That's how I look at him. Introduced me to Buc-ee's. Let's dive into the Pittsburgh Steelers here and what we've seen so far at training camp. There's been a lot going on. The offense finally kind of took a stride yesterday, and the Pittsburgh Steelers finally look like a team that both sides of the ball may be clicking. It wasn't that way for almost 2 weeks, but we are 2 weeks through. We're a day of pads in. You're kind of seeing where the Pittsburgh Steelers are compared to what you thought they were coming into training camp. You showed up at Latrobe. You had expectations. Where have those expectations gone? Where has this team taken you in terms of what you believed they were coming into St. Vincent College and where they stand now? And in the big question of that, are they more or less of a Super Bowl contender than what you thought coming in here? Because you have guys who will hype this up and say, this team is elite. They look ridiculous. You have guys like me who will say, the defense, man, defense wins championships. I'll argue that till I'm blue in the face. And then you have people who say this offense looks atrocious, and you just don't know where to go with it. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, you look at them the last 2 weeks. Has anything changed in your eyes compared to how you viewed them stepping foot onto 110-degree campus at St. Vincent College to where you sit today in your air-conditioned basement?
Yeah, I would say a good amount has changed. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I saw this team being a 9-8 squad, 2.5, 3 weeks ago entering training camp. It felt like another sort of middling season, another campaign that we've been used to seeing out of the Pittsburgh Steelers out of the past few years. And despite the excitement, I wasn't really all in. I will say things in my expectations and outlook has significantly improved from a 9-win team to I see them being both within the AFC North title contention, and I think that they have gone, in my mind, from very middle of the road team to on the cusp of being a Super Bowl contender. I think I have seen a lot of improvement, and I think the defense, absolutely, I love your take. Defense does win championships. It's undeniable how scary they look through 2 weeks of training camp. I know, got to sprinkle in that grain of salt with everything as well, but
yes,
it is a very different, I was up at training camp for a day or two last year, a very different group of guys. The performance from the 2024 defense, reflected that. This is a fiery group. This is a group that wants to piss everybody off that they play against. They don't mind doing it because they feel very confident that they can back it up on the field. If that gets proven wrong, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But for right now, that is exactly the type of defense that I want leading, quote unquote, Super Bowl contender or team right on the cusp of it. So I would say overall, in summation, I saw this team being, borderline wildcard team a couple of weeks ago. Now I think they really will be in the running for a division title. And they're on the cusp of being a Super Bowl contender for me. There's big questions. We talked about them a ton on the show, but they are on the cusp of being a Super Bowl contender for me.
I agree 100%. I was talking to my dad yesterday going to Latrobe, and he said, how do they look? He said, this is going to be another year where everybody gets excited for nothing. And I said, no, because in years past, we were excited about nothing. Like, that's the biggest thing to me, is you were always trying to excite yourself about a defense that looked good, but had holes. It's like, oh, Dante Jackson looks fast, and he's great covering Roman Wilson. He looks really sharp against Van Jefferson. And you're going, all right, cool. Like, that's awesome. Larry Ogunjobi's there. We're not even talking about him because this dude's just a veteran and he's going to be fine. Yeah. Fine is one play every first quarter, and then he disappears for the next 3. That's what Larry Ogunjobi was. You look at this team right now, defense on its own, and say, this is the best secondary the Steelers have had since Troy, Ryan, Ike, and maybe Bryant McFadden or Willie Gay, depending on whoever you're going to put on the other side of them. This is a great linebacking core if it could stay healthy. The defensive line is the best the defensive line has looked, I mean, since depth-wise included, since Javon Hargrave and Stephon Tuitt and Cam Hayward were out there. And even then, the Steelers, they had questions at outside linebacker because TJ Watt was coming onto the scene, but Bud Dupree was on the other side of him. And Bud Dupree had one great season with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The outside linebacker room right now includes 4 dudes who look like studs. That's like, to me, right now, there are no holes on the defense. Not a single one. Chuck Clark's making plays. You're looking at Juan Thornhill being a very comfortable starting free safety. Deshaun Elliott still looks like Deshaun Elliott. Like, this group has 0 holes, and it's not like a made-up 0 holes. It's very clearly they're showing us there are no holes. I mean, Y.E. Black has touched the football more than some offensive players. That's crazy to say, but it's so true. And that's where the Steelers stand. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you were looking for some glimpse of hope, something, and we saw it yesterday. We saw DK Metcalf go up 6 feet in the air and overjump everybody. We saw Roman Wilson moss Joey Porter Jr. and going, well, he could do that. If he does that once a game, great. That's awesome. You saw Jonnu Smith get involved in ways that you were hoping Jonnu Smith got involved. Aaron Rodgers make some passes that you're finally saying, finally. That's what you're saying, is finally. Because up until this point, you're going, that was a bad pass, but this guy's still the best thrower of the football the Pittsburgh Steelers may have ever had. And, that's awesome. But if they're incomplete, it means nothing. Starts to make those passes. I mean, again, I'm not going to say they're a Super Bowl team right now. I'm not saying they're a favorite. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is that coming into Latrobe, you're right. Like, you looked at them as like a 10-win team, probably going to maybe win a wild card because on paper they're fine. You don't know what Jalen Ramsey is. You don't know what Juan Thornhill is. You don't know what Darius Slay is at 34 years old. They're here, pads are on, and you're going, yeah, okay. The Steelers defense alone could probably win you a game against the Broncos or the Texans or maybe the Bengals, depending on if you could shut down Joe Burrow and company enough. But any of the Dolphins, if you still consider the Dolphins a wild card team, any of those wild card teams, I think the Steelers defense alone gives them an upper hand against. Then it's just about, can you beat the Baltimore Ravens? Can you beat the Bills? Can you beat the Chiefs? Can you beat these more dominant teams? I think that's still a question mark. But if we walked into week 15 this season and the Steelers and the Ravens had the same record, I wouldn't be stunned. I'd be like, the Steelers have really put themselves in a place where they look good. And it's good because that's the biggest difference between this season and a lot of other seasons is that the Steelers last year, the Steelers signed Patrick Queen and they go get Dante Jackson and Russell Wilson. And you're going, well, okay, the Steelers are making some moves. Look at these guys. This is exciting. The Steelers are making some moves. That's nothing. That is a small speck compared to what the Steelers have done this offseason. And now you're seeing it on the field actually work. I think it's the first time. I mean, since I've covered the team, where you've seen massive offseason additions and you've seen their immediate impact and how much better it makes this team. And then on top of that, dude, have you seen TJ Watt make one play at training camp? Like, no, not one. Just, and that's the one guarantee for the Pittsburgh Steelers is TJ Watt's gonna make some plays, and that's a piece we haven't even seen yet. I agree with you. I think that coming in here, it was a lot of questions and like you weren't gonna raise expectations. I think today where we stand, my expectations are a lot higher. I'm not saying they're a Super Bowl team, but they're higher.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they have to be higher. They are giving everyone reason to raise expectations. I think that is something that you and I both agree on. I think the level to which those expectations should rise accordingly, I don't really know. And I think this is where I have to bring in the slightly pessimistic view I have, where the thing that is holding me back, at least through 2 weeks, and can change, within a practice overnight after the first preseason game, I don't know, but the offensive line is just tripping me up so hard. And it was just really, I expected this team to look a certain way that included the offensive line not really being a big concern for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come in 2 weeks away. I've come out of the first 2 weeks of training camp with maybe only the offensive line being my biggest concern. And I said pretty much the same thing yesterday. I'm not really worried about figuring out the wide receiver 2 hole if the tight ends work or if the offensive line succeeds. But if the offensive line struggles and Broderick Jones cannot hold up the left side, if Mason McCormick takes a step back as a sophomore slump, if Troy Fautanu doesn't find his footing as a true quote unquote first year player, all of a sudden we're talking about how Aaron Rodgers can't stay up on his feet. We're talking about how this connection between he and DK Metcalf is struggling. We're talking about how the running game, which is supposed to be this huge, huge advantage for the Steelers, is doing nothing to help set up the play action in Aaron Rodgers. And all of a sudden we're talking about expectations rising quickly, going to, wow, these expectations rose and then they just plateaued, they flatlined because this team just couldn't capitalize on all of the excitement that they were building in training camp.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on there. The offensive line comes with massive question marks. And I mean, I expect Zach Frazier, unless you feel differently, I expect Zach Frazier to figure it out. I don't expect Zach Frazier to struggle going into the season. Like if the first snap of the year is bad, I expect the rest of them to be great. That's kind of how I look at Zach Frazier. Isaac Seumalo, I think, is going to be totally fine, which is huge for the team. I think Troy Fautanu looked really, really impressive against a guy like Alex Highsmith throughout this camp. It's the Mason McCormick and the Broderick, which is two. I mean, there's no position on the offensive line bigger than Broderick Jones right now, and he is the biggest question mark. And not being out there is huge. I mean, that you're not wrong, and anybody who talks offensive line is very right. If the Steelers' offensive line is not good, the Steelers are not good. There's no more argument to it other than that. We have to see if they could put it together. But you don't have Lamar Jackson, you don't have Josh Allen. You can't say Aaron Rodgers, just run a little bit and then find somebody. That's not going to happen. Aaron's going to get hurt or some bad things are going to happen. I agree with that. I do think maybe I'm a little bit too aggressive here, but I do think that the Pittsburgh Steelers, if things look bad with Broderick over the next 2 weeks, I will not look to trade for a Broderick replacement. But if my hypothetical is the door is cracked, they'll call about a Terry McLaurin. My same thought is, if Broderick doesn't look great, they're going to call about a backup offensive tackle that they think could potentially be a starter, because they've done that in the past. Chooks was here, signed a big deal, and then they signed Broderick Jones, and then they benched Chooks in the middle of the season. Broderick got benched last year. I think that's a big thing here, is Broderick got benched last year, and the only reason he played the rest of the season is because Troy never got on the field, but Troy was set to start. Troy was going to be that guy on the right side of the line. Broderick was going to get benched. I don't think they'd go out and trade for something crazy, but I do think that Omar would make some phone calls to say, who's a backup that, if Broderick sucks, we actually have somebody, because our team as a whole is good enough for this. Broderick might not be.
Yeah. I think every day that passes, at this point in training camp, I think whether it's right or wrong, the leash becomes even shorter, and the intensity, the need for addressing the left tackle position and the depth there just increases for Omar Khan. And so maybe they aren't looking at it this way, but it seems overly apparent to, I think, myself and a lot of people watching this team through 2 weeks, that this is going to be something that holds them back in a significant way if it doesn't go the optimistic way that Omar Khan, Tomlin, and everybody else seems to be projecting it to go.
Yes, I agree. And again, we'll see what happens. There's a long way to go. It's just exciting that we are about 2 weeks into training camp, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, they do look much more impressive than we thought they were going to look. And with the offensive side of the ball having a day, it does significantly lessen that gap of worry. Because, I mean, if we had this conversation on Wednesday, we're going, yeah, this team's screwed. Yeah, they're going to win games 17-14, and this is Kenny Pickett's offense 2.0. Now it's like, yeah, well, DK's caught some footballs. Even Jonnu Smith got a 9-yard run. That's impressive for a tight end pitch to get 9 yards. That's impressive to have a guy out there for 9 yards before anybody touches him. I think that's good. All right, that's everything on our agenda. We're going to finish this one off by answering all your guys' questions, so make sure you're tossing them in the chat. We'll be right back.
Pittsburgh, this one's for you. From the voices behind all Steelers talk comes Black and Gold apparel, your go-to for bold, fan-driven merch that reps the city, the Steelers, and everything in between. Whether you bleed black and gold or just love that Pittsburgh grit, we've got something for you. It's more than a podcast. It's a community. And thanks to your support, we're proud to bring the passion from our mics to your closets. Gear up, stand out, and show the world what real fans look like. Shop now at blackandgoldapparel.myshopify.com.
All righty. Shout out to our super chatters. Shout out to our members. Can't thank you guys enough. Toss your questions in the chat. We'll get to as many of them as we can before we head out of here. I want to give a massive shout out to Potatoes Salad. Good old Potato Salad gifting 20 All Steelers Talk memberships. That is absolutely insane, my friend. I cannot, and we cannot thank you enough. That is, speechless a little bit. That's an incredible way to start this Friday morning. Shout out, my friend. We love you. We can't thank you enough for that one. If you claim one of these, make sure you're calling into the call-in show every single Wednesday. We've had so many call-ins, to be honest, the last couple of weeks, that as the season goes, my mind goes, we might have to expand this call-in show to twice a week, because this is it. I mean, we had an hour-long call-in show the other day. It just feels like we might need to do Tuesdays, Thursdays instead of Wednesdays. We'll see what happens, but shout out, my friend. Can't thank you enough. Potato salad
Picnic pack.
We live. Shout out, Mac.
We live.
Don't get to go big often, but I wanted to say keep up the great camp coverage, guys. Gonna make it to Latrobe one of these years. Am I the OG salad? Potato salad. Again, it's the chicken and the egg. You guys will have to debate this one of what came first, the potato salad or the macaroni salad. But both of you guys are fantastic at potato salad. You are a pioneer into what has become the picnic pack. And I mean, we cannot thank you enough for how incredible you and everybody else have been in the support along the way. Camp coverage has been a blast. I came home last night. I had to pick up my wife from getting my car dropped off. I don't know if you've gotten one of these yet, but she got in the car outside of Ford or whatever, got in the car. She looks at me. She goes, "You look bad." I was like, "Oh, thanks. Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate it. I think I was watching the game like this. Just like, oh, yeah, this is nice. This is a good time. I'm barely awake. Yeah, it's I do love it, man. It makes you feel like you earn it. You know, that's what camp's done. I bet you Tori's walked in the house and, "Oh, Jacob, you look so fantastic. You're amazing. You know, bright as a feather."
Yeah. That's exactly. Yeah, I get treated like that all the time.
That's it. I just gotta like, "Oh man, you look like shit, dude. You should go take a nap." It's like, "Thanks, love you too." Dude, glad I just drove an hour to come pick you up. Thank you. Love you. Love you. $123 million salad. What a great name here that nobody even thought of. Is that TJ in a salad of money? In a salad of money. Picnic Pack free agent pickup here. Just wanted to say thank you to one of the best organizations for picking me up. So excited for when Romeo Dobbs requests a trade and the Steelers pick him up for a sixth. That would be. Would you go? You're not going to get Romeo for a sixth. Would you go Romeo for a fourth, or would you go Terry for a second? You eliminate both contracts. Contracts are off the table. We're playing Madden. What would you do?
Oh, second. Contracts off the table. Second round pick for Scary Terry. I mean, if you can eliminate the biggest variable, the biggest hang up to me endorsing the Steelers acquiring Terry McLaurin, it's the contract situation. So you remove that. All it takes is a second round pick to get, again, as I said earlier on this sode, like a top 10 wide receiver, both in production, skill, talent, and age. Like as a player in his prime, I'd give up a second round pick to pair him with DK Metcalf.
Yes.
Playing the realism game, I'd give up a fourth for Romeo Dobbs because you have way less to worry about. But give me Scary Terry for a second. That's a wild Madden pickup for the Lurs.
I agree. I definitely agree. We've hit the point of training camp and the offseason where every time I play Madden, I kind of like, and I'm like, "Oh, what would Jalen Ramsey really cost here?" And it's like 2 first-round picks and a player. And you're like, "How did this happen? How did we get here? You know, Minka's not getting the job done. What are we doing?" Yeah, it's a good time. Cordero Patterson salad here. Would you give up a 2026 third round and a 2027 second round pick for Terry McLaurin? If not, what is he worth? Would you give up a third and a second in 26 and 27 for Terry McLaurin?
We're playing this real, or are we playing this Madden style?
We're playing it. The Steelers could figure out the salary cap. You know, the salary cap puts a big damper in everything, and there are a lot of questions in here about the salary cap. So we'll get to those, you know, when the time comes. But we'll say, you know, you're going to end up paying a boatload of money for Terry, but for some reason, Omar Khan's very okay with that.
Got it. Understood. I think that is a very fair return package from the Steelers' point of view. I have a hard time on just like a equal playing field type of point of view justifying spending an extra third round pick to acquire Terry McLaurin when they did not do the same for DK Metcalf, especially when you would be, you know, bringing them in to basically be the 1A and 1B of your wide receiving room. So I am right on the line there. That is a great question. I think, again, if you could get him for that, the value is certainly there. I wonder why he's worth the additional third round pick compared to the second round pick asking price for DK Metcalf. Timing situation, I understand that, but yeah, that's what kind of gets me. What do you think about that?
I agree with that. I think he's older than DK, which is nuts. Like Terry's going to be 30 years old. I think that's so crazy to think about. Is Terry's going to be 30 years old this season? That's old. You're old, dude. DK Metcalf's 28 years. I can't. You know what I mean? Like DK is. That's how I judge players. If you're my age or younger, you still got time. You know what I mean? If you're older than me, you are definitely getting close. And Terry's older than me, and that's how. I mean, I'd match the second. I would match the second. I would say second round pick in 2026. This is what we gave up for DK. We're willing to give it up for Terry. That's great. I don't think I'd go any more than that. I think if you're going second and a third, in this instance, if you're going third, I think maybe not a second in 2027, maybe a third in 2027, depending on what you have to give up. That was the argument way back in the day, too, with the DK thing is, people sat on here. Nick Belsky sat on this show and said there's going to be a bidding war for DK Metcalf. I don't agree with that. Like, I think that teams are going to call, but teams are not going to give up the farm to go get a nearly 30-year-old wide receiver. That's just not going to happen. They're going to make offers. They're going to be good offers, but nobody's saying we'll give up multiple first-round picks for Terry McLaurin. So in my head, I'd say a second in 2026, maybe like a back end fourth or something, or a fifth if you want to, if they need something and you just got to get over the hump. But I think a second and a third, I think we're raising the price a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it reminds me of these conversations we had before the TJ Watt extension got signed, where like there is such a disconnect, a discrepancy, whatever word you want to use, between the actual value of players in terms of like what they would cost for a draft pick and what NFL teams will pay for them, and how stubborn they are in making trades. Like the leverage disappears whenever there's a contract situation like a Terry McLaurin or a TJ Watt or anyone that's in line to make a sizable amount of money. So teams will of course make these offers, but they're going to be so underwhelming. They're going to be so below what the team giving away the player wants to get back. And it always cracks me up, because it's like, when we were talking about TJ Watt, like I think we agreed that like a second round pick would probably be the most that another team would pay for him. And we're talking about the best defensive edge rusher in the game. We're talking about Terry McLaurin, who's coming up on age 30, but he's fantastic. Older. Yeah.
TJ's only a year older than Terry.
Exactly. So it's just like, it always cracks me up. It blows my mind just how far of a disconnect there is between like what the actual value of these players are and what teams are willing to spend to bring them in via trade. It is nothing. It's not like Madden at all, where it's like, oh, I'll give up a second round pick, I'll throw in a third next year, sweeten the deal. They're like, if you touch my fourth round pick, I will kill your family. And you're like, oh my God, this is crazy. Why?
Yes, that's exactly how it is. And I think that, there's the argument of the Steelers only have one second round pick this year. You're probably going to have to give up a first and some to move up next year. But the thing is at the same time, I think I'd rather give up the second this year or this coming year, give it up for Terry, say, okay, chalk off the hands, we're good to go. And then you're giving up your first and probably next year's first. And then you're going into the draft next year with the second round pick at least. And it starts things off all right. So I think I'd rather take the L this year in the second than next year, just because it gives you a starting point. But I agree. Teams are going to go down. McLaurin salad. Do we want two $30 million wide receivers? The answer to this one's in my head is no. Like, you don't want two $30 million wide receivers. I don't think it ever typically works out in anybody's favor. The Steelers could afford two $30 million wide receivers this year, as long as the Terry McLaurin deal is stretched out far enough where it doesn't have a massive impact in 2025, and then doesn't have a massive impact in 2026 when everybody else is like, TJ's contract skyrockets next year. DK's contract goes up next year. Who knows what's going on with Cam Hayward, man? Like, if the Steelers get close and everybody wants to talk like Aaron Rodgers will probably come back, you're telling me Cam wouldn't come back for one more year and say, screw it, let's do it again? Like, I think that you'd find yourself in a difficult place. That's where, to me, it gets tricky is it's not two $30 million wide receivers in 2025. It's two $30 million wide receivers in 2026 and 2027 and 2028, where you're going, Terry's 33 years old and we're paying a boatload of old dudes a boatload of money. And that's, that's where, to me, that's where the $30 million issue comes into play. It's not 2025. It's beyond 2025 when all these guys start to get older and they have massive contracts, and that usually hurts somebody somewhere. And the Steelers will have at least 3 of them that they'll have to worry about. 4 of them most likely, because Jalen Ramsey's also making a bunch of money in the next 2 or 3 years. Like, you're going to have these big deals where eventually something's going to come back and bite you in the butt.
For sure. And to be honest, Noah, we have a nearby example of what, 2 $30 million receivers looks like on a roster in the Cincinnati Bengals. And so I guess the question is, I'm not saying there is a cause and effect here between giving T. Higgins and Jamar Chase all of this money and their inability to sign someone like a Trey Hendrickson. There's clearly an effect on the salary cap. But I guess the question is, do you think that the Cincinnati Bengals are better off for paying out their offense, which is star-studded and imposing and dangerous, and something the Steelers defense has to game plan diligently for? Do you think they are better off compared to how sort of middling their defense appears to be heading into the 2025 season? Or do you think they would have been better off maybe spreading out that money and not giving all that money to the offensive side of the ball? I think I have my answer. I prefer that the Steelers spent all this money on defense and are trying to fill the hole at wide receiver too, than the other way around. But we've seen both sides of the coins and how that's sort of playing out so far. I think either way, you get yourself into a position where there's going to be something lacking. Might be on the defensive side of the ball. You might have an offensive line issue. You might have something going on, but you allocate that much money to one position, you're setting yourself up to be in a deficit somewhere else, in my opinion.
Yeah. Look at, I think the biggest difference, and I agree with you, like, I'd put it into defense before the offense, easy, all day long, any year. Don't even have to question it. The biggest difference is the Steelers won't have to pay somebody $50 million a year to play quarterback, which is, you remove that $50 million and you make it $21 million, which is, say you get the 7th pick in the draft. They're making money. They're not making no money. And that money's going to continue to rise year after year, but you're not paying them $50 million a year. That's just not going to happen. That $30 million can go to a lot of places and pay a couple of dudes. And I think that helps the situation in comparison. That's where I think the Bengals went wrong, is you don't pay, in my opinion, it's not like, I agree with you that you pay your defense before your offense, but it's not apples to oranges it's apples to oranges because you don't pay 2 $30 million wide receivers when you pay your quarterback. Once you pay your quarterback, you look at your roster and you say, there's 3 you guys that are getting big deals. The rest of you are done. You have nobody else is getting paid on this team for the next 5 to 6 years. Everybody's getting scraps, and we better develop from the draft up. Otherwise, we are in a lot of trouble. The Steelers are going to be able to avoid that for a couple of years, but you're also going to, at some point, have guys that you got to pay. And again, that's where, to me, it's down the line. Like, what Joey Porter proves he's worth $15 million a year this year, $16 million a year. You're signing them to $16 million a year. You're eventually going to have to pay these offensive linemen. They're not cheap. Offensive linemen are not cheap. You are going to have to pay, to probably, if you're going to keep Alex Highsmith again in 2 years, you're going to have to figure that situation out. Patrick Queen's on a 3-year deal. Peyton Wilson will at some point. Like, all these questions, it all snowballs into who you giving up to pay a 29-year-old wide receiver. And I think it, again, I don't think it's right now, but I think at some point you definitely hurt yourself in where you're supposed to be. Macaroni salad, potato salad is the OG. I appreciate the humility there. That's shout out to potato salad, man. Shout out to macaroni salad. I've been bumping that song for 3 days now. Haven't turned it off one time. Shout out my guy, Rocky Mountain Oyster Salad. We should be cheap at wide receiver for the foreseeable future. Maybe $30 million for Terry would not be so bad. Again, it's not this year. It's the coming years and the things you'll have to give up in the coming years to make sure that you have $2 million wide receivers. Now, let me ask this question because we just kind of went through all this, so I want to kind of spin it. What in your, like, if you could convince Terry McLaurin, 2-year deal, $30 million, it starts next year. So you got him next year and the year after. Does that change your mind on where things stand? You, at that point, when he's done that first round of Joey Porter, those guys start to click. The Alex Highsmith, that starts to click. You have options with Patrick Queen and Deshaun Elliott and all these guys. It kind of offsets a little bit. Does that change in your mind what you're able to do if you could somehow convince Terry for a 2-year deal instead of a 3?
Yeah, I think a 2-year deal makes a huge difference because to your point, we are just butting up to the edge of this sort of contractual bubble that the Steelers will be facing with a lot of quality players needing significant raises. So yeah, I think if you have a 2-year deal on the table and Terry McLaurin is willing to accept that and maybe he prefers it, yeah, I think that totally shifts the perspective and how that works. It immediately makes it work in the Steelers' favor because the short-term length of the contract only benefits the Steelers. So I think that would change my perspective if I'm Omar Khan immensely. If I can bring him here for 2 years, I'd be very willing to pay him that 30 million plus mark because again, you know that once that expires in 2027 or whatever it is, you're not going to allocate $30 million once again to Terry McLaurin. You already know that you have to keep this X amount available for hopefully your franchise quarterback that you have drafted in that time span. And you have all this other money that you want to allocate to better, more important, younger core pieces. I think that all plays into the Steelers' favor very well. So yeah, if a 2-year deal is on the table, if that's something Scary Terry is looking to do, I think Omar Khan, the eyes light up, the light bulb goes off, and that's a great idea that's going to be in the making for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I agree. I think it's the perfect kind of little recipe here on how to get around it. I don't think Terry would be about it, but I think if the Steelers could convince him, great. Aaron, do you have anything big planned for the draft next year? Also, I think Will Howard is our future. I fell in love with him when he did Gruden's Barstool video. His Barstool video is awesome. And I'll say, like, Will Howard's a good kid, man. He's easy to root for. You definitely enjoy him. He had a big day yesterday. I still don't think he's the future. I think that there's a long way to go before we have that conversation. But he is easy to root for, and I am rooting for him. That's the biggest thing is, like, I am definitely rooting for Will Howard. He is a guy that, while I have to be unbiased talking about him, I will be very honest in saying that if this kid works out and he's awesome, I'd be pretty pumped about it, because he's a kid worth rooting for. Don't have anything planned yet for the draft. The draft's tough, man. It's training camp on steroids in one day. So it's 3 days of awesomeness. But if my wife is telling me I look like shit 6 days, 7 days into training camp practice, I come home that third day. I still remember the 1 year. This is the best draft story I have outside of the draft. I got some great ones from the draft. One day we'll kumbaya and have a good time about it. But the best draft story I have post-draft is 1 year I came home. My wife, it was 11:30 at night or something, the last day of the draft. You don't get home until like 2 a.m. And then the last day, it's like insane. It's like 11:30, 11:45 at night, somewhere in that ballpark. I walk in the door, like, you're fired up. It's the last day of the draft. You're sleeping in the next day. You are so excited. And my wife's got this big dinner, like, ready to go, which, like, you eat so much food in the draft, but it was the thought that counts. I was fired up. She's pouring champagne. I'm pumped. She made me cake, dude. I love cake. I love cake so much. She made me a cake. I sat down. I took one bite of food. The Pittsburgh Steelers signed DeMonte KZ, like, within the bite of food. And I texted somebody in the front office and said, fuck you, immediately. And I was just like, I can't do this. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. We did eat that cake at 1 a.m, and I was pretty pumped about it, to be honest with you. It was a delicious cake. So we'll figure it out. That's my long rant of nothing, but I love the draft, man. I love the chaos. There's something about it that life would just be so boring without it,
Without cake, you mean?
Without both, dude. If you got to earn the cake, you know what I mean? If I'm not, imagine how fat we'd be after that ice cream every day. For those of you who don't know, Millie's ice cream is served next to a cookie bar every day at training camp, and it's a godsend. It's fantastic, but you got to sweat it out. You got to sweat. Otherwise, we'd all be. Have you woken up? Have you hit that day where you woke up yet and you're like, ooh, didn't sweat as much as I needed to yesterday? That was a rough one.
There's never been a day in my life where I have felt that I didn't sweat as much as I needed to, Noah. So I can't relate to that, unfortunately. Is it enough to sweat out maybe the extra scoop I got of the Millie's ice cream up at the ice cream bar once or twice? Maybe not enough. But that's what for the next day is for. You make up for it.
That's what they say. It's like calorie counting. It's all the same thing. Egyptian Cobb salad. No, what's up, bro? Just want to say, since moving to the Berg from Egypt, this AST Nation has been like an extended family. Y'all love y'all, man. Picnic squad for life. I'm glad that you're loving it out here. I still am a little bit mind blown, and I tell people all the time that one of my followers moved here from Egypt to be a bounty hunter, which is just the craziest thing I've ever heard of in my whole life. But that's awesome, dude. I hope I get to meet you this season. I hope I get to meet everybody. We'll have a good, we'll have that kumbaya for sure. Justin Gordon here. We talked ourselves into thinking trading George Pickens was best for the team. Looks like we just have a $20 to $30 million hole in the offense. More anemic offense coming. No, I hear where you're coming from, where you get rid of George, you have a hole to fill, and the Steelers didn't fill that hole. I disagree that, we talked ourselves into thinking George had to go. George had to go. George hasn't stopped talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers since he left. Like, it's like a clear indication that George was every bit of an issue that the Pittsburgh Steelers thought he was going to be. So, I would have traded George, and I know why the Steelers traded George, and to me, it's an argument I stand by.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there was, they're in a hole, obviously, with the lack of having a legitimate wide receiver too because of it, but I think it was the better move for the Steelers. And I also don't think that there was a lot of talking ourselves into how good of a fit he was when he was here. I mean, the talent was unbelievable. His ability to make contested catches is still, among the most elite in the NFL. So there was a lot about his game that I think really helped the Steelers. And, when you had Russell Wilson in at quarterback who just really threw the ball up in the air, and that was about it, having someone like George Pickens around was a helpful asset, but it wasn't enough to keep him around and to pay him, more money eventually. So we do have a hole on offense, but I think that they have more possibility and more likelihood of figuring it out and not having an anemic offense than they had in years past. So I'm hoping you're wrong, Justin, but just because I think I've seen a little bit more encouraging results from the offense. Very little, I will say, but enough to make me think it won't be just like last season.
Yes, I agree. Bernard, does Rodgers get benched if the team starts slow? No. I mean, the Steelers would have to lose 10 games in a row before Aaron Rodgers is on the bench. The season's over. Playoffs are done. That's when Aaron Rodgers gets benched. There's like nothing in between there, unless you feel different. But Aaron Rodgers, in my eyes, has this team until he could be the reason they're losing all season long. He's not losing the job until the playoffs are over. And then you're putting Will Howard in just to see what you got.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the only thing that's going to take Aaron Rodgers off the field is an injury, or, if this team goes 0-15 like that, there's nothing else. This team is going to live and die by the hand of Aaron Rodgers for sure.
Yeah. I agree. Want to bounce off this one. Why not keep George and let him walk once his contract is up so we can get a compensatory pick? We got good play from him another year, and we still get the pick. There's a lot of people also that saying that, maybe George wasn't that bad. I don't want to bash on George. Okay. And I don't really want to dive into all the reasons. So I'll just give you one. George on the outside and George on the inside were viewed very different. People within the Pittsburgh Steelers organization and the locker room knew the problem that George was, and were not fans of it, and were looking to move on. By the end of last season, a lot of those guys in that locker room were not a fan of who George Pickens was and how selfish of a player he was. And when you stop showing up to practice, when you show up late to meetings, when all that stuff starts happening, when you're causing issues within the economy of the locker room, that's when it's time to go. And all that stuff was happening. So while I hear you, and I hear everybody, the talent on the field was extraordinary. The problems that were being caused in the locker room were becoming a little bit too big of an issue to overcome. And, the Steelers were ready to move on, for sure. Bernard, once again, do y'all think Rodgers is a diva? To be honest, I don't. I did. But I mean, unless you hear different, I haven't met a single person on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster who has anything bad to say about the guy. Like, not everybody's like, this guy's awesome. He's a great teammate.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things. I have nothing to report on that front. I still think he's a diva based off of his entire NFL career and sort of that. But I guess being a little bit closer to what he's like on the field and what he's like around all of his teammates. Yeah, they're, unless it is a very well coordinated effort from the Pittsburgh Steelers to keep the image squeaky clean for Aaron Rodgers, if it would have to be very well coordinated, because everyone individually is saying different yet the same sort of thing about Aaron Rodgers, which is that he's been like a super pleasant addition to the franchise, into the locker room, and to everyone else, from Will Howard to the wide receivers to the defenders that get asked about him. Everyone has something encouraging to say on a slightly different perspective about Aaron Rodgers. So I do think he's a diva. It's undeniable what he's, the things that have sort of caused drama in his NFL career and his role in it. But it seems like it's not happening so far here in Pittsburgh. It might happen, I hope it doesn't, but it seems to be just kind of working out okay for both parties right now.
Yes, I agree. And I've always heard Aaron's a good teammate. You just got to deal with what comes off the field, and, we'll see. He said it yesterday. You're going to be on the Pat McAfee show? We'll see. All right. Well, if I had to guess, that's a yes. It's a strong, fat yes. And that's where that goes. Well, everybody tune in, dude. Noon to 3:00 Eastern time every Tuesday. We all got something to do, which, I'm cool with that. Leave a little Tomlin Tuesday, could go to a little Pat McAfee Tuesday, Aaron Rodgers Tuesday, and you have yourself a good day off for sure. $123 million salad, Roman, and a first for Jennings, and Trent Williams from the 49ers. Man, dude, if Trent Williams wasn't 45 years old, okay, the guy didn't need to wear a little badge around his neck with a button just in case he fell. I really, truly think that this trade, you'd have a conversation to be had, but Trent's got 6 games. He's got a season left, if not more. And he still looks like the greatest left tackle to ever play football. But yeah, at some point, age comes into consideration. That's a rental. That's a big rental for this season. I just don't think it'd work out.
Bro, you really said Trent Williams wears a life alert.
Yeah. That's look at it. At some point in life, everyone has to. Okay. And Trent Williams, could still murder me with one flick of the finger, he's getting to that age. It's getting real close.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Let me rein it back in here. Yeah. Unfortunately, due to him being such a seasoned veteran in the NFL, I don't think a first round pick. It'd be a huge overpay for him and Juwan Jennings, even if Juwan Jennings fills a lot of holes at the wide receiver 2 position. I'm okay with trading Roman. Let me make that perfectly clear. If you think you could use him to get a more proven wide receiver 2 or something like that, all for it. But a first round pick, you cannot do that unless you are getting 2 or 3 players in their prime that can help you for 2025, 2026, and 2027 in a legitimate Super Bowl pursuit.
Yeah, I agree. I'd give up Roman and I'd come up with something, but I don't think, and I also don't think the 49ers would be looking for, first off, they wouldn't trade Trent Williams for the world, but if they were, I'd give up something less to try to make this happen. Roman wouldn't hold me back. I really don't think he would. Rec 7, our team is so fragile that a player/pick trade wouldn't even make sense right now. We aren't stacked at any position enough to trade someone away. Look at, you're not trading anybody away. Your team is not deep enough to trade anybody away, nor do you want to trade anybody away. If you're a Super Bowl contender, if you're a team looking to take that step, you're not looking to give up anybody. You're not looking to go like, oh, our outside linebacker group's insane, but let's get rid of Alex Highsmith, because Nick Herbig isn't as good, but he's not terrible. Like I agree with you. I don't think it's deep enough. You'd be giving up draft picks, which the Steelers have a lot of them. They have a lot of them, and I think it would work. But I really don't think you'd give up. The only way you'd give up a player is if it's something like a Roman for another wide receiver where you're kind of filling the same gap. That's how I'd view it.
Yeah, I agree with that overall. I think dealing away an actual position player from the roster would not be helpful because there isn't enough depth across the entire roster. But I think there's like two very minor exceptions. We've talked about how deep the outside linebacking room is, and if you were to ever maybe deal away from a position of strength, I think it could be there. I would not advocate for that. I think keeping that depth is very important for the success of the Steelers defense. But that being said, you have TJ Watt, you have Alex Highsmith, you have Nick Herbig, you have Jack Sawyer, you have four guys who are, the organization loves and they think can be very productive regardless of when they're on the field. So if you were to tell me that, okay, well, we have four quote unquote starters at this position, that tells me that there is a surplus that you could deal from. I don't think they should do it, but on the defensive side of the ball is maybe where you would find those players that you could get more value from. Again, don't do it, but they have it.
Rex Evan, once again, this situation with Terry would have been perfect for next year. Give him a cheaper contract, pair him with DK, and get our franchise quarterback in the draft. I also agree with that. If you could get him next year for $30 million a year for, again, a 2-year deal. A 2-year deal feels so good to me. 3 years. But that's the thing is next year he's going to be looking for money as well. He knows his situation. The dude's stats are ridiculous. But I agree with that. I will say this, and it is encouraging. DK 48 hours ago, I'd say Terry McLaurin is, it makes sense to try and swing big for the fences because you did it and maybe it doesn't work out. DK looked unfreaking believable yesterday. Like that man, I've been waiting to see DK Metcalf jump through the roof. He did it yesterday, and it was awesome. I was like, that his feet touched the top of a linebacker's head. And I said, that can't happen. That's not, it's not me standing out there. That guy's 6'2". I'm 5'7", 5'8". It's not the same. Shout out to DK. He's crazy. Also, I don't know if anybody knows this, but the man's got, how like you get the diamonds on the teeth or whatever, how people do that? He's got freaking vampire diamonds. They're freaking diamonds that look like vampire teeth on his teeth. He's, probably the most stylish man I've ever seen in my life.
That's incredible. Shout out DK. He can kill you instantly, and he also will stun on you and walk in New York Fashion Week. What a guy. What a combination.
What a guy. Shout out Mike Pursuta yesterday, asked a question, had to yell it a little bit from the side. DK so calmly answered the question. And I agree with this because media scrums get real aggressive. And you'll never hear me yelling in a media scrum ever, dude. I'm the guy, I will sit there and guys are like, what'd you say? Because I'm not yelling at nobody. We're 4 inches from each other. People get aggressive. They yell. Dude, somebody yelled in his ear, and he calmly answers the question, goes, and you yelled in my ear. And I was like, oh, shivers. that was a little dangerous. Shout out to DK Metcalf. Justin Gordon, okay, you guys are up there every day. I'm hearing running backs, not good. Wide receivers, not good. Offensive line, not good. Offensive taking a beating daily. How does this work out? That 100% was the case up until yesterday. Yesterday, the offense definitely won the day. And it was the first time that you saw them win the day, and it was impressive. The running backs still didn't have a good day, which, you're waiting to see those. And it's tough to judge the offensive line without pads on. But I think the wide receivers took a pretty significant step forward yesterday. The tight ends took a significant step forward. DK and Aaron took a significant step forward. And I think that's, something to feel good about. But you're not wrong. Like, the offense hasn't looked good. Yesterday was the first day they did.
Yeah. And that's to be quite honest, Justin, like to answer your question, like I'm just fine with them getting beat up in training camp. I'm fine with the defense winning every single day of training camp. And if the offense doesn't look good at all for the next couple of weeks and months until week 1 of the regular season, like, uh, I don't think Noah and I are like trying to sound the alarm by any stretch of the imagination. This is just what we're seeing and reporting on whenever we're up at camp. Like it's, yeah, you can't, if the defense wins a lot of the drills and the defense is making the plays, that's we got to report it, But all that said, I don't see it being an overwhelming issue. Yes, I've voiced my concerns about wide receiver 2, about the offensive line, but this is the time that I think they should be looking the worst that they could be. And this is the time that they should be getting beat by the defense, in my opinion. And if that helps them improve, and if that is the sort of the catalyst for them improving whenever they face maybe less quality, less talented defenses in the regular season, then it all will be worth it. I'm not hitting the panic button on the offense just because this elite defense and what will hopefully be a top 3 defense in the NFL is just whooping their butts for the most part.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Egyptian Cobb salad. So I traded Pickens for Romeo Dobbs and Madden, swapped Thornhill for Simmons. Madden record over 30 games is 20-2. Retire in peace, Cordell Patterson. Shout out Cordell. I mean, that would be Pickens for Romeo Dobbs, but I mean, Juan Thornhill for Justin Simmons would be awesome. Would be awesome. This is my whole life right now, is just playing Madden on my time off at 1 a.m. to, just addicted to the grind. If we added Scary Terry, would it make the 2027 season that much more important, as that would give the rookie we take next year another target? Yeah, I mean, I do think it make 2026 more important. But yeah, I think that's the case either way. Like, I think the Steelers are trying very hard to stay a Super Bowl contender and keep that window open starting this year for the next 4 years. That's their game plan. After that 4-year mark, you're going to have guys like TJ. You're going to have guys like DK. You're going to have a lot of question marks of what's going on. They have 4 years right now in my head to say, how do we go about this and what gives us the best opportunity? I don't think that it's going to be Terry, but I agree with, it does make next season that much more important. I expect the Steelers to have another option for whoever the quarterback is next year. Either way, I don't think it's going to be a first-round wide receiver, but I wouldn't be stunned if it's a second, or a free agent or something. I do think they're going to add somebody.
For sure. Yeah, I really do anticipate them getting their franchise quarterback and then either an offensive like lineman or something to pair with him, or a wide receiver in the mold of the Joe Burrow finding his Jamar Chase. They want to have these sort of franchise anchors grow together, in my view. So I can see that happening for sure.
Yeah, one more here. Shout out member for 5 months on Yinzer Salad. Shout out to a member on 1 month here. Fantastic, guys. Can't thank you guys enough. Should we consider Tyler Boyd? Should be super cheap. My problem with Tyler Boyd is he plays Calvin Austin's position, and Calvin Austin's not going to lose that position. So I like Tyler Boyd's fine, but he's the one wide receiver right now where every time somebody brings him up, I just go, I don't think he improves your team. I don't. I think you have a Tyler Boyd. I think his name's Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth, and I think they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I love Tyler Boyd, love a hometown guy, but he doesn't do much for me at this point. No. Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been like, hell yeah, now's the time for the hometown boy to come home. But no, I don't. I'm good. Pass.
Broderick Jones, a member for 5 months. Happy Friday, all Steelers talk. Love the show. Shout out to the ever-growing Picnic Pack. I hope everybody's having a great Friday morning. I know I am. I know I am for sure. Thomas Dottie. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, but coming a YouTube member, shout out. Make sure you're calling into the call-in show by Wednesday. Rex 7, do you guys think that the offense is bad enough for them to play more in the preseason than expected? A wide receiver trade more likely with Calvin not showing up. I don't think Calvin has anything to do with it. I think it's all Roman. What does Roman look like? And is he good enough to supplement that? If not, the Steelers, like, Calvin's in the plans no matter what. Roman may not be. And if Roman's not, maybe you go out and get another wide receiver. Who that wide receiver is, what that wide receiver looks like, we will see. But I think that's what does. Do you expect the offense to play more in the preseason?
No, I really don't. I expect to see about 4 seconds of Aaron Rodgers in the preseason in total.
Same.
I expect to see. Yeah, I mean, I can maybe see like Roman and Calvin, maybe getting more snaps than the ones, quote unquote, will get in the preseason. But for the most part, no, I don't think that they need to like really see the offense gel in preseason. I think despite, some of the alarms we might be sounding and some of the reporting that we've been sharing, they're quite okay with the progression of the offense right now. And, take that for what you will, Picnic Pack. But like, I don't think that they are looking for the offense to show X, Y, and Z before the first preseason game, or else they're going to play the first half of the game. Like they're going to play the first series, the first couple series, and then they'll be gone. And that'll continue for the rest of the preseason. I don't think they're going to change off of that.
No, I agree. Tortellini salad here. Noah and Jacob, any changes in plans for coming to the Steelers and Jets game? If you go, let's take some tequila shots before the game starts. Tortellini salad, I'm honored. Okay. But if I walked into the press box smelling like fresh tequila shots, I don't think I'd have a job anymore. So as much as I appreciate the offer, I appreciate you. Got to turn it down. That being said, I want to see everybody on the road and at home games this year. I try really hard to walk through all the tailgates before I get into the press box. So if you see me, stop me, dude. Say what's good. I'm usually dressed just like this without a hat on, so we chilling. I'm the only guy in the press box. Everybody's like, oh, I got to wear a suit. I'm like, dog, I'm wearing a sweatshirt. Okay, I got business to take care of. And I'll probably be repping some AST. So shout out papaya salad. Why didn't the Steelers lock up Rodgers for 2 years? Just saying, tell me the last rookie to win the Super Bowl. There's never been a rookie to win the Super Bowl. Don't rule out Aaron Rodgers returning next season. I think everybody keeps hinting at it. And I think at some point you got to take that seriously. That being said, if the Steelers pull it off this year, or if the Steelers look like they don't need Aaron Rodgers next year, that's what they're doing, is they're securing themselves, saying this is a 1-year bridge thing. We need a guy next year and we got to let him take off. I agree with you. Don't rule out Aaron Rodgers coming back next year. Here's a fun one. David, Alex Highsmith and a 4th for Terry McLaurin.
Oh, nope. Can't do it.
Yeah, I think that Alex Highsmith for Terry McLaurin is a conversation to have. I still think I'd say no. Alex Highsmith and some for Terry McLaurin. Alex Highsmith's worth more than Terry McLaurin. In my eyes, Alex Highsmith he's younger. He is already under contract for another 2 years. And I just he comes with less, but makes just as big of an impact. I don't think I would do it. I don't think I'd pull the trigger on that one. Madden Salad, aka Maddie, as of right now, what is the rating that we would do our due diligence on Scary Terry 0 to 10? I'd say an 8. I think the Steelers would call the Washington Commanders and see what's up, and then call his agent and see what's up. And, if both answers are good, awesome. If both answers are, we want a 1st-round pick and we want $35+ million a year, I bet you the conversations don't go any further than that. So Omar Khan's a real quick guy. You know what I mean? Like he's hey, what's up? Would you trade him? What would you trade him for? Great. Hang up the phone. Like so that conversation, I bet you I'd give it an 8. I think he's going to call. You feel different?
Yeah. No. I'm right there with you. I would be surprised if that conversation hasn't already happened.
Yeah, I agree. Gunnar Olszewski salad. This may be a stupid question, but is Backs on Backers Oklahoma drill? It is. Shout out to all the kids who definitely got concussions doing that one. Best time ever. Do you think the Steelers will go for a mid-tier wide receiver instead of a big name? FYI, you guys rock. Nicholas, appreciate you. Yeah, I think that if the Steelers are going to add somebody, it's going to be somebody. It's going to be a Romeo Dobbs. It's going to be somebody that's splashy, but not a superstar. And I think that that's the way they'd go about it. I don't think that right now they're shooting for the stars. That could change at one point, obviously. But if I had to guess, it's one of those middle of the pack guys.
Yeah, I think even Romeo Dobbs sounds like too above mid-tier for him to enter into like my realistic. I think he's the person that I keep going back to as my preference for someone that feels attainable and productive, but isn't like a quote unquote superstar like Terry McLaurin. But that's why I keep coming back to someone like Gabe Davis, because it just feels like the mid-tier is where they're going to go. And when I think mid-tier, I think a veteran who's had some production, but it has a lot of question marks too. And that just keeps leading me down this road to a veteran like a Gabe Davis or something like that. So yeah, Nicholas, I think mid-tier is where we're looking for an improvement, and I think it's going to be a less exciting name than many of us want to believe it will be.
Yes, I agree here. Egyptian Cobb Salad. Last one. Do you think that Rodgers, as a quarterback, not being afraid to attack the middle of the field, does it make defenses not be able to read us as predictably? 100%. The Steelers' offense is they ran a tight end pitch yesterday. They're a much less predictable offense than they were a year ago. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I think that from what I've seen so far, the Steelers' offense looks much less basic than it looked a year ago.
I mean, yeah, when you have 4 tight end sets, you're talking about a high class schematic master in Arthur Smith.
The 04 offense. When they went 0-4, I went, what are you doing here, brother? Like, and then they pitched it to Jonnu, and I went, that was a 9-yard gain, dude. That was the best run of the day. Shout out to Jonnu Smith, my friend. Yeah, I do think throwing over the middle of the field is going to change everything for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jacob sweaty Diet Coke salad. Jacob sweating out tequila, and you think I don't look? Me and Jacob are. It's just a puddle in the truck by the time it's over. Me and Jacob are just sitting there pouring sweat for hours. You know what I mean? Like us and everybody else. Go look at the sidelines during practice. It's a rough time, my friend. Last ones here. Noah and Jacob. I think Aaron Rodgers' throw time last year was 2.62 seconds, which greatly helps the O-line to not hurt the offense as much. Wide receiver and tight end will need to get open fast, or Aaron Rodgers throws them open. I do think it's going to be a massive lift for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The thing is, you got to be able to let some rip for DK. You know what I mean? You got to let Calvin get deep every once in a while. That's where you need to have these guys. But I do think Aaron Rodgers' quickness, that's the one part. I haven't seen Aaron Rodgers sit in the pocket and been like, oh, that's a clear sack. Not many times. A couple of times you've been like, that would have been a sack. But a lot of times it's like, Aaron got it out pretty quick there. And I think that is going to help for sure. Yeah, he's always been a quarterback that gets the ball out, 2.6 seconds, something like that. And, with the Jets, I think he was kind of fighting a losing battle for the most part and getting the ball out that fast. But I think if the Steelers can give him 2.6, if you can get him up to 2.7 seconds clean in the pocket, you'll have Aaron Rodgers making plays on a very consistent level. And that is, again, why I keep pounding the table for why offensive line is such a hole, is such a question mark, and such a priority, because if they only can give him 2.4 seconds, he will be on the ground all of the time. Yeah, I agree. And then we'll finish it off. Would you pay Rodgers next year $10 million just to sit on the bench and mentor our new rookie? The answer to me would be yes. The answer for Rodgers would be no chance, brother. This is not why I'm coming back to play football. I also don't think Mike Tomlin would do the same thing. So I don't think he'd ride the bench as a bridge quarterback. Yeah, I think I would be okay with that if you felt that was the best way to go about it. But there is a 0% chance Aaron Rodgers would come back to sit on the bench.
Yeah, agreed. I would love it if he wanted to just be a glorified coach, but I don't think that would be good for his soul.
No, definitely not. And shout out Potato Salad, like the stream. With that said, guys, we're heading out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcast. Please go to Apple Podcasts, hit that download all, give us a 5-star review. We're so close. We're so close to moving up to that 4.8. Can't thank you guys enough. And as always, find all our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We'll be back tomorrow, or I'll be back tomorrow live from St. Vincent College. Until then, enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.